Hi, this is Ritik, your biology subject matter expert from MEMONEET. So, in this video, we are going to concentrate on a new topic that is the photosynthesis in higher plants. Like we have been seeing plants, right? That means you have studied how the evolution has happened and how the classification came and the structure, morphology, and anatomy of plants in the previous chapters, right? Today, we are going to concentrate the very major and the important process that is photosynthesis. And photosynthesis only takes place in higher plants, that too green plants. So, what is the phenomenon and why photosynthesis is very important? Okay, and what are the things that comes under this specific process? Everything in detail we are going to study. So we know that one or the other way, all living organisms, we are dependent on the plants for our food. But what about plants, like how they are, right? So in what way they are dependent on? So you can see in this figure that either directly or indirectly, we all are dependent on the plants for our food. So the green plants, they actually make or rather synthesize their food. So for that, they go through a process called as photosynthesis and are therefore called as autotrophs. Autotrophs are like the one which are able to prepare their own food. That means they don't depend on other organisms for their food. Nutrients and all, they do depend, that's for sure. I'm not saying like, but the way we want the raw plants, okay, for our food. So in that way, the plant doesn't depend. So that's what I'm meant to say. So these green plants, they carry out photosynthesis. Uh, Physiochemical process by which they use the light energy to drive the synthesis of organic compounds. Ultimately, all the living forms on Earth, they actually depend on what? Sunlight as a source of energy as a source of energy. So therefore, the photosynthesis is actually important due to two reasons. So what are they? One is it is a primary source of all food on Earth. This is one thing. Because of the photosynthesis, plants they are going to get their all the nutrients, essential things, and all. So now what we do, we actually try to consume plants directly or indirectly, and we get whatever the nutrients right required. So photosynthesis is very important and it is the primary source of all food on earth. This is one point. So it is also responsible for the release of oxygen into the atmosphere by the green plant. So whatever, like we all organisms are dependent on what? So we are dependent on oxygen. So oxygen is actually released by the plants, especially the green plants. They are the one which they are going to release the oxygen. So that is the reason why primarily photosynthesis is very important. So there have been several experiments which have conducted to study regarding, the photosynthesis occurrence and all. So one experiment is the experiment to look for the starch formation in the two different leaves. So one is vegetated leaves or the leaf that was partially covered with black pepper and exposed to the light. So that means they had some leaf here, a green leaf, and partially some of the regions, they were being covered by the black paper. Okay, black paper. So this is one point. And they were exposed to sunlight. So on testing these leaves for the presence of starch, it was clear that the photosynthesis occurred only in the green parts of the leaf in the presence of light. That means what happened? So once they have tested the region where exactly the starch is present, only in the green part of the uh, you know leaf they could observe the presence of starch. That means only in the green part itself, what you were able to see is the starch was there. So wherever the area which was unaffected by starch, that means absence of starch, they were colorless, and area affected by the starch test, they were blue, black in color. Basically, what happens, you can understand that in the green region itself, photosynthesis will occur, and starch production will also be there. The next experiment was to check a part of leaf has been enclosed in the test tube, as you can see here, containing some of the KOH solution. So this solution contains what? KOH solution. So half part of the leaf was been closed with the KOH solution, which was exposed to the KOH solution. Okay, while the other half is exposed to the air. Right. So the setup is then placed in a light for some time, that is in front in sunlight. So on testing for the presence of starch later in the two part of the leaf, they found that the exposed part, this is the exposed part, right? So out of these two parts, they found that the exposed part of the leaf tested positive for the starch, while the portion that was in the test tube or that was in this flask, right? So it tested negative. So this shows that the CO2 was required for the photosynthesis. One thing was very much clear, that even carbon dioxide is also required for the photosynthesis. Joseph in 1733 and between 1804, that was this time period. So Joseph, he has also did some demonstration or an experiment where he observed that the candle burning in a closed space. So in one jar, what happened? So a burning candle and a live rat was kept and it was closed. So after few minutes or seconds, or after few minutes, he observed that the candle whatever that burning candle, so it got exhausted. And as a result, after some hours or something like that, even the mouse, it suffered due to the suffocated and in a closed space, and even eventually it died. Okay. So in the next jar, what he did is he have placed a burning candle, then he has also placed a green plant as well as a light mouse. And even after many hours, he could observe that. So the candle was still burning and the mouse stayed alive. So this clears that a kind of procedure, that is the photosynthesis, might have occurred. So it's getting the carbon dioxide from the mouse as well as from the burning thing. Then as a result, it has utilized it, and it is giving what? O2, that is oxygen. So in Jan showed that the sunlight is essential to all the plants process, that somehow purifies the air fouled by burning candle or breathing animal. That means Uh, sunlight is very essential part for all the living organisms, especially plants. Okay. So with the process of photosynthesis and all. So whatever the breathing that we release, carbon dioxide that has been filtered and it has been absorbed during the photosynthesis. So in the experiment, they have studied that the aquatic plants showed that in the bright sunlight, what happened? So you can observe here a kind of bubbles, right? Yeah. So bubbles were formed around the green parts, while in the dark they did not. That means in presence of sunlight, they could observe a bubbles around the green plant inside the water, whereas in the dark condition they did not saw such formation of air bubbles or sorry, water bubbles. So later he identified these bubbles to be an oxygen. Hence he showed that it is only the green part of the plant that could release the oxygen. So then Julius, he also performed an experiment. They provided evidence for, production of the glucose when plants actually grows. So glucose is usually stored as what? Starch. Hence, later study shows that the green substances in the plant, which is what we call as chlorophyll, right? uh, is located in a specific bodies that is actually called as chloroplast within the plant cell. So he found that the green parts in plant is where the glucose is made. Okay. and that the glucose is usually stored as what? The glucose is actually stored as the starch. Then T.W. Engelmann, so he also performed an experiment using a prism. Engelmann, he used a prism where he split the light into spectral components and then illuminated a green algae. Okay. And later he placed it in a suspension of the aerobic bacteria. So that means you can see here that the green algae and they have been suspended with the aerobic bacteria. So the bacteria were used to detect the site of the what the major thing with the bacteria is. These bacteria, aerobic bacteria, they were made as a kind of identifier, like they were made to suspend where exactly the oxygen is present. Okay. So what will happen is the bacteria will obviously they are going to accumulate mainly in the region of the blue and red light of the split spectrum. Okay, so they were being accumulated more in the region of the which region? Red light and blue light of the split spectrum. So there are prism light was passed through the prism as you can see when a light is passed through this prism, they will split into many colors, vibrio, like the rainbow colors, right? So one spectrum will be having one color now. So most of them, he observed that in the blue color as well as in the red color, the accumulation of bacteria were absorbed more. So the first action spectrum of the photosynthesis was thus described. So it resembles roughly the absorption spectrum of the chlorophyll A and B. That means that's the spectrum, absorption spectrum of the chlorophyll A and B is what he tried to explain. In general, what he was trying to explain you is like where exactly at what spectrum or at what light the chlorophyll activity is more and you can absorb the oxygen level, where exactly the oxygen evolves. So by the middle of the 19th century, the key features of the plant photosynthesis were known. Namely, the plants could use light energy to make the carbohydrates from the carbon dioxide and water. So the empirical equation that represents the total process of the photosynthesis for oxygen evolving organisms were then understood as this is carbon dioxide and water in presence of sunlight. What you're going to get? You're going to get the carbohydrates as well as oxygen, right? Then we had Cornelius in who based on his study of purple and green bacteria, which I told you before. So he demonstrated that the photosynthesis is essentially depend upon the light dependent reaction. Okay, as I told in the spectrum, you could observe the oxygen releasing was more in the red as well as blue spectrum. So one thing was clear that it is essentially depending on the light dependent reaction in which the hydrogen from a suitable oxidable compound, it is going to reduce the carbon dioxide to carbohydrates. So this can be expressed as in this equation. So where what you're going to do is we had some strong hydrogen forming, what do you say that? We had something like hydrogen forming. Um, yeah, basically we had a strong hydrogen forming bond. So with presence of carbon dioxide in presence of light, what happened? You could see the um release of the carbohydrates as well as water. Then what exactly this photosynthesis is? So within the chloroplast, there is a membranous system considering a grana. So this is a grana. Okay. And we have another thing called a stoma. Then we have stoma. lamella, and the matrix stoma is also there. So there is a clear division of the labor that means within the chloroplast. That means within the chloroplast, we can observe that there's a clear division of labor and they perform their own specific function. So the membrane system is actually responsible, like we have outer and inner membrane. So this membrane system is actually responsible for trapping of the light energy and also for the synthesis of the ATP and NADPH. Okay, this is very important. Then next we will be having the stoma region. So inside the stoma region, an enzymatic reaction synthesizes the sugar, which in turn forms what? Starch. The formed set of reactions, since they are directly light derived, that means they all depends on the light in presence of light. So they are called as light reactions, that is photochemical reactions. There, the action is actually derived because of the presence of light. So the later are not directly light drive, but are dependent on the products of light reaction. That is, due to the light reaction, you will be observing the ATP and NADP synthesis. Hence, to distinguish the latter, what you are going to do is they are called by conventions. That is, as dark reaction. Like they are the one which are going to release the carbon dioxide. Then we have, however, they should not be considered to mean that they occur in the darkness or they are not light dependent reaction. So that is one thing that we have to consider. So there are pigments which are involved in the photosynthesis. So you can see the colorations of this flower in this figure, right? So pigments are the substances that have an ability to absorb light at specific wavelength. So, chromatography technique has been conducted to separate the leaf pigments, shows that the color that we see in the leaf is not due to the single pigment, but due to the four pigments. That means whatever the color that we are seeing in the leaf, right? It is not because of one single pigment, but because of the four different pigments. So one is chlorophyll A, which is actually bright or blue green in the chromatography, as you can see. Then we had chlorophyll B, which is actually a yellow area, yellow green color kind of thing. Then we have xanthophyll, which is actually a yellow color. Then carotenoids, which is actually yellow or yellow orange color. So they together are, they are the four pigments which are responsible for the low coloration of the leaf. So these graph together shows the most of the photosynthesis takes place in the blue and red region of the spectrum. So in the before, like we had a spectrum, right? So one thing was clear with the spectrum that the graph that you are seeing here will actually show that the most of the photosynthesis actually takes place in presence of blue and red region of the spectrum, and some photosynthesis does not take place at the other wavelength of the visible spectrum. So through chlorophyll is the most, this is the one, right? Chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B is the most abundant major pigment responsible of trapping light. So other tricoloid pigments, like other pigments that we are seeing, like chlorophyll B and xanthophylls and carotenoids, which are called essential pigments here. So one thing we can see here is chlorophyll and this carotenoids, they are and xanthophylls, they are actually what? Essential pigments. Where this chlorophyll A is the major pigment, which is actually green color that you are seeing here, is actually responsible for the photosynthesis. Okay, it also absorbs light and transfer the energy to the chlorophyll A. The next topic is the light reaction. The pigments, in coming to the light reaction, the pigments are organized into two distinct photochemical light harvesting complexes, which is nothing but LHC, within the photo system, that is one, that is PS1. Okay. So you can see here there are many, what do you say that within this photons are there, pigment molecules are there are many pigment molecules, right? So within that, you will be seeing the photosystem one, that is PS1 and PS2. So are named in the sequence on the discovery, anyhow. So we have this LHC, that is photochemical, that is light harvesting complex, right? So these light harvesting complex, that what you are seeing here, they are actually made up of hundreds of pigment molecules bound to the proteins. So each photosystems has all the pigment except one molecule of the chlorophyll A. So forming a light harvesting system, they are called as antennae. Okay. So these pigments helps to make the photosynthesis more effective by absorbing different wavelength of the light. So this is all about the light reaction. So what happens here is a single chlorophyll A molecule forms a reaction center, and as a result, what happened? The reaction center is different in both the photo systems. So that is in PS1 and PS2, the reaction will be different. In PS1, the reaction center, chlorophyll A, has the absorption peak at 700 nanometer. Hence, it can be called as P700. While in PS2, what happens? It has the absorption maximum to 680 nanometer. So we can call it as P680, absorption light. So this was all about the light reaction, how exactly the light reaction occurs. So in the next video, we will be discussing more about the other reactions that are going to happen within the plant leaf, especially with regards to photosynthesis. Till that, if you feel any doubt, you can reach me out through the comment section or through the Telegram channel. And very important thing is, don't forget to like, subscribe the channel, and also share with your friends. Thank you.